What's going on, guys? Hey, welcome back to class, baby. This is officially day one of the class starting. For those of you who are new here, you don't know me, my name is Sax, and I go by Vegas. I live in Ukraine. I served in a couple different units here in Ukraine as a combat medic. Back home in the U.S., I was a firefighter and an EMT outside of Fort Worth, Texas, at a volunteer fire department called Day Cordova Fire Department for the better part of 3.5 years. Um, Basically, what I've put together is a, a training that has, in my opinion, been needed for the last 4.5 years, but better late than never. And I'm not seeing anybody else do this. So I found a gap where I think lives are potentially being lost, and we're trying to fill it now. So there's a lot of there's a large gap between old school Tccc tactical combat casualty care and new school Tccc. Basically, what I mean by new school is the implementation uh, of drone warfare, of a peer-to-peer fight, of having no casualty evacuation vehicles, stuff like that. None of that is implemented into the old school Tccc. That's very much designed for a major superpower military fighting a much smaller disorganized unit like something that we might find in the Middle East. So today, we talked about the syllabus and kind of what we'll be covering, the whole general idea of the series in the last video. Today, we're jumping into it, and no BS, we're just jumping straight into the first part of March. March is the ordered algorithm that goes from priority, MARCH, each standing for a different level of medical intervention at the priority top being the highest priority. So M is massive bleeds, massive hemorrhages. This is the number one cause of death in Ukraine. This is much different than like civilian EMT style. Massive. The M is only happening like your motor vehicle accidents, some really gnarly crimes maybe, but here in Ukraine it makes up exponentially more deaths than anything else. Obviously, right? It's a war zone. There's large explosions, stuff like that. So we're going to cover M in my way, basically, with the implementation of what we now know in peer-to-peer combat environments. Okay, so before we do M, I want to tell you guys, any TCCC course that you're going to take that is the standard current TCCC is going to tell you about 3 different phases of care. There is, I'm writing this down as we speak here. There is CUF, care under fire, meaning this is the very first step. So you need to, first priority is win that gunfight, right? You win the fight. If you can't win the fight, you suppress the enemy until they are no longer a massive threat, to where you can progress onto the next stage of the next phase of care, which is CUF, which is tactical field care. Tactical field care is where you're going to get your hasty tourniquets, is what they're called. It's the things that you can do really really fast while still taking the occasional round overhead or still under fire, right? Well, partially. Tactical field care is the next step, so it's not after the first contact. You're not in immediate danger. Okay, that's tactical field care. And don't worry about focusing on these 3 phases too much for a reason. Hold on. That's tactical field care. That's where you're going to get your tourniquets, and you put them high and tight rather than like 3 to 5 inches above where the actual wound is, where they're supposed to go. You just throw a tourniquet high and tight on a limb because you don't have much time, but you need that bleeding to stop. That's an example of tactical field care intervention. And then there is PFC, or sometimes it's taught as TAC evac. PFC is prolonged field care. Prolonged field care is where you're going to do your more, basically think of it as you have made it to a CCP, a combat or a casualty collection point, to where you're in a much safer location. You can now do some more in-depth interventions on this casualty and stabilize the casualty and pack them up, prepare them for evacuation. Okay, now everything that I just told you, forget it. Just kidding. Well, kind of. So these 3 phases are harped into you. They're really pounded into you in most Tccc classes, and they're all over the final test and exams. At what stage do you do this intervention? Is it CUF? Is it TFC? Is it PFC? In Ukraine, they all blend together, and there is a lot of gray area um, in between different phases, because for there to be a transition from care under fire to tactical field care, that means that you eliminated the enemy and or you have suppressed them enough that they are no longer a threat. That is never going to be a thing in Ukraine. Even if you do end up in a firefight and you kill the enemy, you are still under fire from constant drones, artillery, uh, or indirect fire, dropper drones, FPVs, all kinds of stuff. Okay, so there is no there they all blend together, and you need to have a baseline knowledge of how to do basically everything. And I know it sounds like a lot, and it is, but that's what this course is for. Really, really cut and dry, hopefully simple as possible. And we'll kind of jump to it. So back to M. M is the first part of the March algorithm, which is massive bleeds. Like I said, the mechanism of injury, the what causes most injuries in Ukraine is blast wounds, especially now. It used to be shrapnel because of the amount of indirect fire, artillery, mortars, dropper drones. They would, they splinter, throw off shrapnel, and people would get shrapnel everywhere. That's still extremely dangerous and extremely prevalent on the front line. The only difference is now drones are more prevalent. So blast wounds, you're starting to see your major trauma injuries, limb amputations, massive, massive gashes and openings, arterial bleeds, stuff like that. So massive bleeding is, again, the number one reason for death in Ukraine. And that leads me to the interventions that we take to stop or at least slow massive bleeds as much as possible. Ideally, stop. You want to stop the bleed. Stop the bleed. Okay, say it with me. Stop the bleed. All right, cool. So, tourniquets, you guys. Most of you know what a tourniquet is. Sorry. Most of you guys know what a tourniquet is. If you don't, learn. Is this going to work with this? I might have to take it off the... Let's see. I could put the little background back in a minute. Now you just see my room. So tourniquets. A big issue we have in Ukraine is, well, let me start with this. These are going to be your most important intervention out of this entire course that we learn. Okay, tourniquet, tourniquet, tourniquet. You need to know how to put these on with your eyes closed, with one arm tied behind your back. Literally, because you could lose an arm, and you need to use the other one to put your tourniquet on. You could lose both legs. Now you gotta get tourniquet on both legs. It's and we've seen these examples time and time again here in the country. It's sad, it's morbid, but you got to be prepared for it. So freaking important. Now, with that said, here in Ukraine, we've actually seen a lot of lives lost because of bad, cheap Chinesium tourniquets. Okay, so there's a few brands that I will recommend to you if you are deciding to build your own IFAC. I've got a couple different IFACs here, and we'll be going through these. I've made these ones. Excuse me. Or I got them standard and then added my own stuff to them, because there's a baseline for most IFACs, what they have, and we'll cover that stuff down the line. But good brands of tourniquets, okay? You want to find CAT, C-A-T, CAT 6s and CAT 7s. There might even be, I don't think there's a CAT 8. CAT 6s and CAT 7s, that's what this is. CAT 6, I believe. Good quality. Okay, aside from CATs, SICH or SICH if you're in Ukraine, which is S-I-C-H. Also, Nipros are good, D-N-I-P-R-O. Nipros, and another American brand is SAM, S-A-M. These are all good quality. If you can't find the brand somewhere on You can't see it because it's black, but it's stamped in here. It says cat. Oftentimes it'll be in different places on the actual tourniquet. If you can't find a brand, don't use it, because when you're throwing this thing on and this needs to save your life. When you're throwing this thing on and you're cranking it down, if it's cheap, this turn dowel will start to bend, or it could rip straight off. You could rip the material. We've seen a lot of cheap tourniquets cost lives in Ukraine. So just something to keep in mind. Don't ever, you can have cheap tourniquets around, use them for training. Use them because you want to train with these, and I'll explain in a minute. But always in your kits, in your IFAKs, always your good stuff, okay? Always your cats, your SAMs, if you're in America, cats and SAMs. And then in Ukraine, there's also Seek and Nipros. Coffee. Okay. Now, the way original Tccc is taught is your first intervention when you spot a massive bleed is direct pressure. So everything that we're going to be talking about through this course is going to be out of the premise of you're operating alone or you have one battle buddy with you, okay? Because that is how, if you get injured in Ukraine, the most you're going to have with you is most likely a battle buddy, at least for the foreseeable future, until you can get more people there. Okay, so let's say your buddy is hit. The first step, the old school way, is direct pressure, meaning you want to run up, you see a spurting, or you see a large soak in their clothing, you're just immediately on it with all your body weight, right? This is good. Direct pressure and pressure on a heavy bleed is always going to be good, but it's not optimal, in my opinion, as the very first step. So initially, you're going to want to talk to this guy. Let's say I'll use my buddy Shaka, for example. So I see Shaka over there, maybe 10, 15 meters away, and FPV goes off by him. His leg from the knee down is blown off. Okay. So I'm yelling at him, Shaka, you with me? You okay? You there? And he's responded, yeah, I'm okay. I'm effed up, blah, blah. And now I'm yelling at him, get your tourniquet on, get the tourniquet on, get the tourniquet on. So you should have your tourniquets on your kit that are accessible. And the rule of thumb typically that we went by is no less than 4. So I used to keep some on my shoulders and on my plate carrier with a rubber band around it like this. So in case of emergency, you can rip it. The rubber band is not strong enough that it will keep you from pulling it, but it's strong enough to keep it in position while you're moving. There's different places to keep them. There's even pouches for tourniquets, somewhere that's accessible for both hands. Because if you lose if it's right here, let's say it's right here, and you lose your right hand, now you're like doing one of these methods and you can't get to you know what I mean? So make sure it's on your kit and accessible. So I'm screaming at Shaka, hey, get your tourniquet on, get your tourniquet on. And he's like, oh, I can't, it hurts too much, whatever. First of all, you need to be able to do it yourself, okay? But let's say he's in a position where he's not able to. So now I'm moving to Shaka, and I'm running over to Shaka, and as I'm moving to Shaka, I'm trying to make sure that I'm not just going to run in there and die myself, because there is no point in hurrying up to go help someone if you're just going to add to the number of casualties or KIAs. So you want to make sure you're at least able to, you think that getting to that location is going to be safe enough for you to get there and help and apply a hasty tourniquet. Okay, so I make this split-second decision. I think, okay, I can get there. The drone just blew up. We probably have another couple minutes till the next drone. So I'm running over to Shaka. I get to Shaka. I'm doing a quick visual inspection, a visual check, and looking. I'm like, okay, very obviously his leg is blown off. That, no matter what, you need to get a tourniquet on that remaining leg as high up and as tight as possible. Okay, so I'm going to use my arm for an example because you guys can see it better. So you got you run up on him, right? and he's got his tourniquet on him. Try to use their stuff if possible, but whatever. You just want to save a life. So you want to stop the bleed. So you run up to him, you rip this off of his plate carrier. So it's folded up like how they typically are. It's hard to see at the black, kind of. Anyways, you rip it open, right? You've got this, now it's kind of in a circle. You're pulling it, so you've got kind of this tail and loop situation going on. Tail and loop, okay? Now you want the turn dowel, this part, to the sky, and you're always going to be pulling towards your heart. So if it's this arm, you're pulling towards your heart. If it's the other arm, the dowel's still up, but it's flipped, you're pulling towards your arm. You do not want to be with it out like this, and then you're trying to like pull it this way or this way, and it's you're not getting enough leverage on the strap, on the tourniquet. So dowel up, tourniquet on as high and as tight as possible that you can get it. Try to get it up in that junctional area, like armpit area. Now, super important, I know it's hard to see because the black, but you don't need to see this part too much. Super important is the first pull. This is arguably the most important part of applying a tourniquet, because this sets the groundwork for everything else you're going to do. This first pull needs to be as tight and as strong as you can get it. So you are pulling it as tight as you can, as tight as you can get it, right? Okay, now strap it on that you can, a little bit back so the tail's not in your way, because now you got to crank this thing. Okay, so now you're here, and if you pulled it tight enough, you should only be able to get 1.5 to 2 turns. Okay, you should never be cranking this thing 4, 5, 6 times. That's not how tourniquets work. So you want to get, there's a half a turn, and here is a full turn. And when you practice this, do it full strength, man. You want to feel what it's like. Okay, so now it's tight, right? So there's a couple different ways you can determine if this is working. You can obviously look down at Shaka's stump. Is it still spraying blood? No. Okay, the bleeding stopped. If it's not like a massive amputation, and let's just say it's a large cut, then you can feel down below. So let's say it's on his thigh, or on on his thigh, since we're talking about his leg. You can feel for a pulse down on his foot or his ankle. See if there's any blood still flowing through there. If there is, that means your tourniquet's not tight enough because there's still blood moving. If you can feel no pulse, there's no blood moving down there by the foot or the ankle, that means your tourniquet is good. It is a proper tourniquet and it's effective. The blood has stopped moving. Okay, so you've got this thing as tight as you can. You hook it into the horns. There's 2 horns here. You hook it into the horns. Now you're going to grab the remainder of your tail, okay, and you slide that through the horns. Again, it's black, so it's hard to see, but you slide it through the horns, ideally around your dowel, and back down onto some more of the Velcro part. Now you're taking this little strap, flipping it over. So now you've got a tight little package that hopefully isn't going to be too cumbersome when you're trying to evacuate this person. And you want to if you're able to, write the time on this tourniquet so that when this person, this casualty, gets to the next stage of care, they get to a combat medic, or they get further, they get to a casualty collection point. Now those medics are going to look at it and say, oh, he's had this thing on for 2 hours. Okay, it's time to move it or whatever. Okay, so that's your tourniquet. Like I said, this is a skill you can absolutely and should be practicing. This is one of those things where you can do from anywhere. You can do in your spare time. You can get tourniquets for cheap, like the little cheap Chinese ones for training. You don't want to be, but you also don't want to use your good tourniquets for training, right? Your cats, your cat 6s and 7s, those can be a little more expensive, so you don't want to train with those. Train with the cheap ones. Anyways, so that was quick tourniquet. I'm trying to think if there's anything immediate that. Oh, okay. there's a ground rule that here in Ukraine, the most infantry units train that you need to have the tourniquet on in under a minute because you can bleed out in 90 seconds or something theoretically if it's a massive bleed. Sometimes less. So they train you need to do it under 90 seconds. In Azov, we trained under 30 seconds. And then I was able to get it to about 16 seconds and I was the fastest in our unit, which I'm one of the combat medics, right? You should expect that. So 1 minute is the standard. In my opinion, that's too long. You should have it at 30 seconds min or max. Okay. And it's with your eyes closed. You're doing this. Boom, boom, boom. It's like second nature because if God forbid you do have to use one on yourself, it's going to be probably the worst day of your life and you're going to be potentially in shock. You're going to have your bell ring. You're going to be confused. This needs to be second nature to you. Just boom, boom, boom. Your training needs to kick in. Okay. You can't be thinking about it like, wait, the stick to the sky, pull it towards my heart. No, this needs to be natural. And I taught you how to apply it to yourself. If you're running up on a casualty and you're applying it, you need to do that. You don't have to worry about pulling it towards their heart, right? You just need to get the most, since you're doing it for them, get the most power and tension into that tourniquet as you can. So that'll be pulling towards you, right? So that kind of reverses in that theoretical. If you're doing it yourself, pull it towards your heart because you get more leverage that way. If you're helping someone, you strap it on them and you're pulling it towards yourself. Okay, that's tourniquet. This is by far the number one. I'm going to keep harping on it. This is potentially the most important part, one of the most important parts of this entire lesson series. Okay, tourniquets. Okay, now let's say, I didn't pull out now tourniquet is, we got to use a different casualty now example, okay? Okay, so now we've got a casualty with a large cut, why am I spacing on this word? I don't know the word. A very large deep cut to where it is massively bleeding. It's causing arterial bleed. So the arterial bleeds, they are spurting. It's dark red, almost like a purpley. It's soaking clothes. It's pooling around the casualty. You run up on them and there's a pool of blood. That is a massive bleed. But we'll cover the indicators of massive bleed in a second. So you run up, they've got a large cut or let's say it's a cut. Okay. You apply your tourniquet already. Your tourniquet's on. It's still bleeding a little bit, but the massive bleed has stopped. So you're going to do you're going to pack the wound, okay? There's two different types of gauze. There's your standard gauze, which everybody has used or played with or seen in a medical kit. Very standard, just stretchy, soft gauze, right? And the idea is you make like what they call a power ball. You make a little knot, almost just a little ball like this, and you want to try to get this as deep into that cavity where the blood is coming from. So you will stick it in, right? And ideally, you'll be able to feel where the blood's coming from. Typically, you want to pack towards the heart. So if you're packing on their leg, you want to pack it towards their heart, so upwards in the wound. And then you're doing the pinch, and then you use your other finger or your other hand. You go in and you hold the pressure there. You grab some more. Boom. You swap. You grab some more. Hold on. Grab some more. You go in. You're always keeping pressure on that artery or whatever's bleeding. Boom. You grab some more. You cut the pressure on it. Boom. You grab some more. Right, and you're doing this replacing your more and more gauze under the finger, next one under the finger, next one under the finger. Okay, you're using all the gauze every single time. You're not using part of it. So this is your standard gauze. Your standard gauze has no coagulant agent on it like your combat gauze does. The combat gauze is the next one. This is, in my opinion, and probably most combat medics' opinions, the way you want to go if possible. This is basically, it looks like a brick, but it's your gauze like this, but it's been soaked in a blood coagulating agent, and something that helps stop the blood, the bleeding, right? It's very effective, and a lot of times what I've seen people do and what I've done in training is you'll use this one first. You'll use the actual combat gauze. There's all kinds of different brands. This is military issued from Ukraine. You use the combat gauze first, get it into the wound. You get it all packed in there. And let's say this is the combat gauze, right? It's all in the wound. You got it, and you're keeping pressure on it. Now you grab your other roll, the standard gauze. You grab your other standard gauze. You do the same thing and pack it into there. Boom, boom, boom. And ideally, you've got a wound that's like this, right? Ideally, what you want to see is like this. It's so packed and so tight of gauze, it's protruding. We call it the mushroom cap. So you want to see that mushroom cap out of the wound. Okay, and it shouldn't be bleeding through the mushroom cap. If it is, you pull all that shit out and you redo it. Or if you think you can fix it by just putting more in, then you do that too. Okay, so now we've got our mushroom cap. We've got our combat gauze that went in first to help stop the bleed down at the bleed location. Now the combat gauze on top, or the regular gauze on top. Now we want to pull out our pressure bandages, also known as Israeli bandages. I might need here. Vacuum sealed. Typically, you're going to have your trauma shears on you, at least as a medic. Even as not a medic, you should have those handy. Boom. Okay, so this is a pressure bandage or Israeli bandage, okay? So let me preface too, if there's clothes in the way of your work area, if there's like their combat pants or combat top is in the way of where you're working, you need to get past that. Okay, so use your trauma shears, cut it, rip it, whatever you have to do. Expose the wound so you can see what you're working with. If it's not already exposed, for example, if you see a big pool of blood in their pants, for example, but you can't see the actual wound, get your trauma shears, cut it, rip it, whatever you got to do. Okay, so now fast forward, we're back to our mushroom cap in that large incision. I call it incision, but it's the large cut wound. Okay, now we've got our pressure bandage. So you're going to go over the top of the mushroom cap with the padded side of your pressure bandage. Okay, so the mushroom cap is here. You're going over it like this. Okay, you want the horns of this that I'll show you what it's used for in a second. You want the horns over the wound because this is what's going to apply the pressure. Okay, so now you're wrapping, and as you're wrapping, you're going through the horns like this. Okay, so you just snake them through. There's a gap in the middle of the horns. You can see. So you're just snaking it through the gap. You come through and you're keeping tension on this. This is elasticy, so you're keeping tension on this the whole time. You're getting it through those horns. Boom. You're getting it through those horns. So now we've got the combat gauze that's in that wound, the heavy bleed. We've got the normal gauze on top of the combat gauze, and now we're putting a pressure bandage on top of all of it to hold it and keep more pressure on it. Okay, boom, boom, boom. You get, oops, it's tied up. You get this all the way wrapped around. Now, for the last wrap, you're coming through like normal, making sure it's through, and then you're wrapping back. You go back around, and this is where this is what makes it a pressure bandage. That backwards, right? You're regular through like the normal direction we just came through. Now we go backwards the way we came, and now this adds additional tension on top of those horns, where on top of that wound. And then there's a little hook device here that you'll just hook into the bandage somewhere, like this and like this. Okay. So it's really that you're going through, go through, wrap, and then you reverse it, boom, and that's where you're cranking, getting that tightness. The Tccc always talks about you don't want this to be the tourniquet. You don't want this to be cutting off the circulation. We can get into more of that later. Depending on what you're doing this after you apply a tourniquet, or you are doing this and then you're releasing the tourniquet. Okay, but that depends. This is just what you need to know. This is how you properly pack a wound. Combat gauze first, or regular gauze, whatever you have accessible. You should have both in your IFAK. You stuff it in, whether it's the combat gauze or regular gauze or a mix of both, and it could take 4, 5, whatever. But the goal is to make it really stiff, and you're getting this stiff mushroom cap on there. You physically cannot push anymore. Your fingers should be sore from how hard you're packing this wound. Okay, so you're packing, and now you've got this. This is what you're looking for, and then you're wrapping the pressure bandage over it. Boom, now you got even more pressure. So now you've got that massive bleed stopped via the tourniquet. Now it's packed. Now, as long as there is no, you don't see any blood coming through your wrap, through your packing, now you can try to do a tourniquet conversion, which is basically releasing the tourniquet, and or a deliberate tourniquet, which is adding a tourniquet closer to the actual wound, so that if they do have to end up amputating part of that limb, they have to amputate less, because now the tourniquet is further down, closer to the wound, so there's more of their limb that's able to be saved. So I'll explain that here in a minute. Let me get this shit off me. Okay, so we just covered, let me make sure. Yeah. Tourniquet and then wound packing. Those are your big things for massive bleeds. Okay. Now, what are your indicators of a massive bleed? Let's talk about the indicators again. Spurting, literally like in the movies. That's an arterial bleed that is coming from one of the arteries, one of the major big blood routes. So spurting, pooling, right? So the casualty's laid out, and we've all seen it. There's a pool of blood around their head, around their back. If there's blood pooling anywhere, that's a massive bleed. Okay. Pooling, spurting. Hold on, I'm trying to do this from memory here. So anytime there's an amputation, anytime there's a lost limb, you assume massive bleed. So if you see somebody's leg or arm or hand or something missing, think immediately tourniquet, tourniquet. Okay, no matter what, their foot, whatever. So that is actually one of the indicators is amputation or loss of limb. Spurting, pooling, oh, and soaking, meaning if you're running up on them and their whole chest, their uniform or whatever they're wearing, their clothes, their top, their bottom, it's soaked in blood, that means heavy bleed, or that's a good indicator that there could be a heavy bleed. Their whole pant leg is soaked, or their thigh is soaked in blood. And okay, so those are the main indicators, including the color. Knowing the differences of color, like if you were to prick yourself with a needle, you get kind of that lighter color blood, light red, or like a reddish light red. Arterial heavy bleeds, which are arterial typically, are dark blood. So that's another indicator. If you see dark colored blood, that's heavy bleed. Okay, I should have written all this down. So we've got soaking of the clothes, soaking. We have pooling, blood pooling. We have loss of limb. We have dark colored blood. And then spurting, shooting, spraying blood. Those are your major indicators of a heavy bleed. And you see any of those, then your brain should automatically think tourniquet, 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 every time, tourniquet, tourniquet, tourniquet. Whether it's on you, it's on someone else, always tourniquet. We have seen, especially earlier on in the war, a lot of Ukrainians weren't taught properly how to use tourniquets. So they weren't using them at all. And then they were taught incorrectly. So they would get, for example, shot in the shoulder through and through. They would tourniquet their arm, and they'd have that tourniquet on for 6 hours, and the doctor would have to amputate it. The doctor's like, why didn't you just pack that wound? That wasn't a massive bleed, right? Yeah, they got shot in the arm or something, for example, through and through. It's bleeding, but it's not any of our indicators. So it's not a massive bleed. So we've seen kind of this evolution of tourniquet knowledge here in Ukraine, but we've also seen the statistics of life-saving drastically increase with people's knowledge of tourniquets and how to use them. So being able to, and I'm going to cover this as well, and then we're going to wrap it up because it's almost 40 minutes already. We're going to talk about tourniquet conversion and tourniquet replacement. Okay. This is important, especially in Ukraine, like I said, because people are losing the Tccc. Let me be clear about this. Where's my tourniquet? Tccc teaches that tourniquet replacement and conversion are not at a CLS level. They're not at the lower level of medical intervention. That's supposed to be at a higher level of medical professional, because in the original Tccc, they're assuming that you're getting this casualty to evacuated safely and to the next level of care in a reasonable amount of time. That's not the case in Ukraine. If you leave a tourniquet on for more than 2 hours, the odds of losing that limb start to exponentially increase. And the odds of you being evacuated to someone who can replace that or remove that for you in 2 hours are very low. So that's a big gap in old school Tccc and new school Tccc, peer-to-peer, Ukraine, Russia war, Tccc. So everybody needs to have the knowledge of replacement and conversion. So let's do conversion. Conversion basically means you've got this guy's tourniquet on, and whoever put it on them wrote on the time about 2 hours ago. Okay, so you know in your head, okay, we need to try to convert this, meaning we need to try to remove this tourniquet and instead just have it packed with gauze, um, and see if the packing can keep it from massively bleeding still. That's the goal. So you notice 2 hours, you're like, okay, we gotta start thinking if we can get this thing off of him. So the idea is you pack that wound if it's not already, like we discussed. You pack the wound in the same way that we already talked about. And now you're going to take the tourniquet and you're going to take the turn dial, and over the course of roughly a minute for one turn, right? Because if you flood the blood back into that body part, it can cause more issues that we could talk about later. But you slowly release it, letting the blood come back to that part of the limb. And as you're slowly releasing it, you're watching your packing and making sure your packing isn't starting to soak, and that massive bleed is continuing. Ideally, what you're seeing is this stays clean, your mushroom cap, and all the way until you release that tourniquet all the way off. That means the blood has been restored to that limb, and your pack is efficient. Okay, that is what they call a conversion, because you're converting a tourniquet to just packing. You're removing it. I wish they would call it tourniquet removal, but that's tourniquet conversion. And then tourniquet replacement is the other one, that if it is, oh, well, let me mention, if the blood does start to come here while you're releasing it, you tighten it back up. You tighten it back up, right? If that massive bleed starts to happen and your mushroom cap starts to fill with blood, you tighten it back. You don't want to mess with that. Again, you need to know what you're doing with tourniquet conversion and replacement, okay? Okay, I'll cover that later. So replacement means that you will be replacing the tourniquet with another tourniquet closer to the wound. Now, a good rule of thumb, they say 3 to 5 inches above the wound is where you want it. So if if my arm was amputated here, was blown off from my forearm down, and my tourniquet that my medic put on me is still up here, if it's past 2 hours, I could end up losing the rest of this arm because it starts to die because there's no blood flow. So you want to replace this tourniquet with another one closer down towards the wound. So a good rule of thumb is your 4 fingers above the wound. If it was amputated at the elbow, you'd put it here, and now you would put your second tourniquet right above it. So your second tourniquet would go right here, hard to see, 4 inches above, and now you will crank that tourniquet on the same way you would any other tourniquet, really, really hard, while the other one, the one that's higher up still, is still cranked on there, okay? Once the second one is placed, now you can start to replacement tourniquet. Now you can start to loosen this other one. And you do it the same time frame. Try to do, like 45 seconds to a minute per turn. It's a slow process, because like I said, if you flood that empty limb, if you will, that's had no blood flow, you flood it back with blood, you can cause more serious damage. So really, really slow. And as you're doing that, you're watching the wound and seeing if the blood is continuing or if your second tourniquet is doing the trick. Ideally, your second tourniquet was done properly and it's stopping the blood. So now you've gotten blood flow back to here, and now this person's more likely to save this part of their limb rather than them getting their forearm blown off. Now they've lost their entire arm because nobody decided to check how long they had this tourniquet on for. Now they've just lost their forearm that was blown off, and they still have their upper arm and shoulder. That's tourniquet replacement. You're replacing the hasty tourniquet, the one that you had to crank on in the heat of the moment. You're replacing it with a deliberate tourniquet, one that you're able to focus on and put 3 to 5 inches above the wound. Okay. If at any point it does start bleeding again when you're releasing this one, then you tighten it back up and you redo this tourniquet, the deliberate one, the one that you're putting on closer to the wound. You redo this one, do the process again. If it starts bleeding again, you crank this one back, you do it again. You want to make sure it's not bleeding, it doesn't start bleeding when you replace the tourniquet. Okay. 45 minutes. It's a long video, but it's going to be faster than any other Tccc course you're going to take. And in my opinion, that is the most important stuff that needs to be covered. Plus, we even talked about the different phases of care, cuff, casual, or care under fire, TFC, tactical field care, and then PFC, prolonged field care. So those are good to know because any Tccc test you're going to take is going to ask you about that. But real in the heat of the moment experience, it has no real value because it's all meshed together. Your prolonged field care needs to be thought about during all of it. Your care under fire, you're always under fire, so that's happening during your prolonged field care. So anyways, you guys, hopefully that was really our first part and the first part of March. Massive bleed. I hope you guys got some value out of that. Please let me know in the comments. Tomorrow we will do A, which is airway. A, March, M-A-R-C-H, A, airway. I love you guys. We'll see you in the next video.